The cul-de-sac was the kind of place where lawns were as pristine as a freshly minted dollar bill, and the only sound allowed to pierce the serene bubble was the gentle rustle of leaves in the afternoon breeze. It was the type of neighborhood where even the squirrels seemed to tiptoe. In this quiet enclave, the arrival of Karen was as subtle as a cymbal crash at a cello recital. Karen was the new head of our homeowners association, a position she embraced with the fervor of a monarch ascending the throne. She had a penchant for order that bordered on the obsessive. Her garden was immaculate, not a single weed daring to rear its ugly head. Her house was a beacon of compliance, every shutter perfectly aligned, every shade of paint, HOA approved. She was the self-appointed guardian of tranquility, and my dog Max was the latest target of her crusade. Max was a Labrador of infinite enthusiasm. His barks were not mere noises, but exclamations of joy, spontaneous symphonies that celebrated every flitting bird and every passing car. In my yard, Max's voice was a cheerful accompaniment to my morning routines. To Karen, it was an affront to her kingdom of silence. The first note arrived with the precision of a Swiss watch. It was tucked under my door, its neat script betraying the author. "Your dog is too loud," it declared, as if Max had committed some unspeakable crime. I sighed the note, crumpling slightly under the weight of my fingers. It was the first of many. Karen's campaign was relentless. Notes became phone calls, each conversation laced with her clipped, insistent tones. She had an exquisite talent for turning mundane concerns into declarations of war. Each interaction left a residue of irritation, a bitter aftertaste that lingered like cold coffee. Yet I refused to be swept into her storm of discontent. Instead, I chose a path less traveled in these parts. One of quiet defiance. I remained calm, cultivating a garden of patience while Karen sowed seeds of discord. Every note was met with silence, each call with a polite nod of acknowledgement. It wasn't ignorance, it was strategy. In the evenings, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows that stretched across meticulously mown lawns, I would sit with Max. His head would rest on my knee, and we would gaze out over our little world. Here in the fading light, I found solace in the steady rhythm of his breaths, a reminder that peace could be found in the simplest moments. But beneath the calm exterior, an idea was germinating. A plan that would turn Karen's obsession into irony. It was as if Max sensed it too, wagging his tail with a knowing flicker of his eyes. Our retaliation would be a serenade, not a battle cry. I would transform Karen's annoyance into a grand gesture of unexpected alliance. The opportunity presented itself sooner than anticipated. Rumors of the upcoming annual HOA meeting floated through the neighborhood like autumn leaves. It was to be held at the community center, a gathering of homeowners, each eager to voice concerns, suggest improvements, or simply relish the communal spirit. And it was here, amid the obligatory coffee urns and folding chairs, that the stage was set for Max's debut. As Karen prepared her agenda, her list of grievances ready for airing, I concocted my plan. Max, the so-called neighborhood nuisance, would become the heart of the meeting, the symbol of community spirit that Karen so ardently claimed to protect. A mascot. Yes, an official emblem of our little corner of the world, a role that Max, with his infectious joy and boundless energy, was born for. It was a notion so audacious, so unexpected, that it could only be met with stunned silence or perhaps reluctant applause. And as the idea took root, I felt a smile tug at the corners of my mouth. Karen wanted order. I would give her unity. Max, the dog deemed too loud, would become the voice of our cul-de-sac. The initial shock of receiving the citation had worn off, but the taste lingered bitter and unyielding. It was absurd, really, to think that Max, with his floppy ears and jubilant bark, was the root of chaos in our placid neighborhood. But Karen had her sights set, And like a hawk fixated on prey, she was relentless. Within days, the floodgates opened. Citations trickled into my mailbox like unwelcome guests. Grass a quarter-inch too long. Trash bins not aligned with military precision by the curb. A shadow of a dandelion daring to emerge in the lawn. Each notice was punctuated by her unmistakable, loopy script. A flourish that seemed to mock with every curl and swirl. Max watched me from his spot by the window, his tail an ever-present metronome keeping time to the silent symphony of absurdity. I wondered if he sensed the undercurrents of tension or if he merely saw a world filled with endless squirrels to chase and grass to sniff. Beyond the paper and ink whispers began to circulate Karen's words, laced with saccharine civility, spread like wildfire at the neighborhood gatherings. The wine glasses clinked and nods exchanged, each one a silent agreement to her narrative. Max, it seemed, had become the embodiment of everything. Disruptive irony twisted around their words like tendrils of smoke. In my mind, I played over the scenes like a well-worn script, Karen with her precise bob and steely gaze patrolling the streets as if she was the custodian of some sacred order. Her disdain for anything that disturbed her orchestrated tranquility was palpable, an almost tangible entity that hung in the air. The rules started evolving, mutating into a grotesque parody of themselves. No outdoor decorations without prior approval. Approval that required a committee chaired unsurprisingly by Karen herself. Each new rule, a tightening noose pulling us all inexorably into her web of control. The community, once vibrant with life, now seemed to move with a uniformity that was eerie in its perfection. Yard's pristine children hushed the very soul of the neighborhood, quietly suffocated under the weight of compliance. And amidst it all, Max remained blissfully unaware his world, untainted by the pettiness of human squabbles. He was a creature of joy, an embodiment of the very chaos Karen sought to eradicate. Yet it was this unbridled joy that became my silent rebellion. The absurdity reached a crescendo on a particularly sweltering afternoon. Karen, with her clipboard, a scepter of authority, approached my property with the determination of a general marching into battle. Her eyes flickered over every minute detail, searching for transgressions like a bloodhound on a scent hound. Our eyes met, and in that moment the air between us crackled with unspoken words. I could almost hear the gears in her mind calculating, strategizing her next move in this unending chess game she had crafted. A smile crept to my lips, slow and deliberate. Max, sensing something amiss, trotted over his eyes, bright with curiosity. In that moment, I knew the path forward. Karen's world was built on rigid control, but mine thrived on resilience and quiet rebellion. Later, as I sat with Max under the setting sun, I reached a decision. If Karen wanted a battle, I would give her one. Not with noise or chaos, but with the subtlety and grace of a well-played hand. The plan unfurled in my mind like the first notes of a familiar symphony setting the stage for what was to come. The morning sun broke through the window, blinds casting stripes of light across the living room floor, a reminder that change was as inevitable as the dawn itself. I sat in the quiet company of my thoughts, the soft padding of my dog Max like a heartbeat against the polished wood. It was a peace, punctuated by the memory of Karen's shrill declaration that Max was too loud. Her words echoed a looping record of disdain that twisted in my mind, like a vine creeping over a forgotten trellis. The irony was almost beautiful. Karen, she who thrived on the dissonance of others' lives, had inadvertently inspired my retaliation. Subtlety would be my weapon of choice. An overt counterstrike would be too simple, too predictable. First, I gathered evidence. Every moment of Max's day became a documented routine. His bark was not a symphony of chaos, but a sporadic note in the melody of suburban life. I recorded his interactions with the neighborhood children, their laughter entwined with his playful barks. Each video was a canvas painted with innocence and joy. Karen's accusations would dissolve like smoke under the weight of this reality. Next came the paperwork. I pulled the HOA bylaws from their dusty resting place. There, buried among the regulations on lawn height and mailbox color, was a clause about community mascots. The bylaws were a labyrinth of legalese, but they held potential. A community mascot needed a nomination, a vote, a simple majority. Each neighbor I approached became a conspirator, their eagerness fueled by years of enduring Karen's reign. I watched as their faces transformed, animated with the prospect of gentle rebellion. A simple signature was their ticket, an endorsement of change wrapped in the guise of a simple motion. On the day of the HOA meeting, the air buzzed with an electric anticipation. I sat quietly, a still point in the swirling eddies of conversation. The room was a collage of faces, each etched with the determination to reclaim a sense of community spirit. Karen presided over the gathering with her usual air of imperious authority, oblivious to the shifting tide. When the time came, my voice cut through the din. Calm and unassuming, I proposed Max as the official HOA mascot. Each word a stone dropped into the still waters of the meeting. The proposal was met with a ripple of approval, a collective nod that swayed in unison like a field of wheat in the breeze. For a moment, Karen's mask slipped. Her eyes widened, a fleeting glimpse of vulnerability quickly masked by indignation. Yet the vote was unanimous, a decision as solid as the earth beneath our feet. Max's place was sealed, his presence now woven into the fabric of our community. As the meeting drew to a close, Karen's voice, usually sharp as a winter wind, wavered. "Congratulations." She murmured the word heavy with reluctant respect. I nodded acknowledgement of a victory that was as sweet as it was quiet. Outside, the air was crisp and clean, the sky an endless expanse of blue Max. Bounded ahead his tail, a banner of triumph. The world felt different, lighter. The shadows cast by old grievances faded, replaced by a new dawn where peace reigned, punctuated only by the joyful sound of a dog's bark. In the aftermath of the meeting, a quiet determination settled in my bones. Karen's complaints about my dog Max had escalated beyond reason, and I realized that confrontation alone would solve nothing. This was a game of chess, not checkers, and I intended to make my next move as thoughtful as possible. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across my desk as I sat, pen poised over paper. The legal documents spread before me were a maze of language precise and unyielding. I had researched, consulted, and prepared. Every word was a seed planted for justice to bloom. Max lay curled at my feet, his rhythmic breathing a steady companionship. His presence reassured me, strengthening my resolve. He was more than a pet. He was a symbol of everything Karen could never control. His bark, loud and joyful, was a declaration of life itself. To label it noise was an offense I could not abide. I filed the necessary paperwork with the HOA's board, a motion to officially recognize Max as our association's mascot. It was not without precedent. Other communities had official animals: a cat, a peacock, even a donkey in one whimsical case. Why not Max? His presence enlivened the neighborhood, drawing smiles and conversation wherever we walked. The process was not quick. Bureaucracy seldom is, but like the slow, inevitable pull of gravity, it moved forward. Weeks passed. Each board member received a copy of my proposal, complete with endorsements from neighbors who had suffered under Karen's tyrannical reign as much as I had. The signatures accumulated, each a small rebellion against the reign of terror she imposed with her petty complaints and unsolicited letters. I imagined Karen's reaction upon receiving the proposal. Her face, I imagined, twisted in disbelief, a storm of indignation brewing beneath her carefully maintained exterior. She would not yield easily of that. I was certain. But I had faith in the simple truth that reason and community spirit would prevail. Max and I continued our walks more purposeful now, our path a silent protest. Neighbors stopped to chat, their words laced with support, their gestures kind. Max wagged his tail, blissfully unaware of the battle his presence waged. The day of the next board meeting arrived. Karen's eyes met mine across the room, a clash of wills silently acknowledged. Her smile was a thin veneer, a mask poorly concealing the tension beneath. I took my seat, calm as a monk on a mountaintop, resolute. As discussions unfolded, the atmosphere thickened, the air charged with anticipation. My proposal was read, my argument articulated in clear, unwavering tones by a sympathetic board member. I listened heart steady as the room considered the question of Max, the unrealized mascot. A verdict was reached not with the thunder of gavel or the clang of swords, but with the quiet certainty of a decision made. The motion passed by the narrowest of margins. Max was now more than my dog. He was the neighborhood's herald, a symbol of resilience against the tyranny of small minds. Karen's face was a study in restrained fury, her mouth a thin line of protest unspoken. She rose the scrape of her chair against the floor, a harsh punctuation to her retreat. I exhaled, releasing the tension that had coiled within. The battle won, not with shouts, but with the patient application of justice. Max, oblivious to the drama, barked once, a note of joy echoing through the room, a sound no longer silenced or condemned. It was over. For now. But in this moment at least, the world felt a little more balanced. Max had found his place, and in doing so, we had all reclaimed a piece of our lives from the grasp of a self-appointed ruler. Quietly, powerfully, the story unfolded as I had hoped. The afternoon sun sprawled lazily over the neighborhood, casting long shadows that stretched like fingers across manicured lawns and perfectly paved roads. A day that should have felt ordinary, yet carried the promise of resolution. The air was thick with anticipation, a kind of stillness that precedes a storm, or in this case the long-awaited HOA meeting. My heart thudded with a steady rhythm, a quiet drumbeat echoing the resolve I carried. This was it. The culmination of weeks spent navigating the maze of bylaws and gathering silent support from neighbors who had grown weary of Karen's tyrannical reign. The community center felt different today, brighter as though it sensed the shifting tides. Residents filled the space, their whispers creating a gentle hum. Faces that once seemed indifferent now wore expressions of curiosity and a hint of rebellion. I could feel the power of unity in the room, its presence both comforting and awe-inspiring. In the midst of it all sat Karen, her posture, rigid spine, a perfect line of defiance. Her eyes darted around the room, searching for something she couldn't quite grasp. She knew the tide had turned, but she clung to her authority like a drowning sailor to driftwood. It wasn't anger that fueled her. It was fear of losing control, of stepping down from a pedestal she'd built with her own harsh words and unreasonable demands. I stood near the front, the weight of 1,000 unspoken words resting on my shoulders. My dog, whose innocent bark had been the catalyst for this battle, sat by my side, his tail a metronome of patient loyalty. As the meeting commenced, I let the words flow, weaving a tapestry of facts and emotions that had simmered beneath the surface for far too long. There was no need for theatrics. The truth was powerful enough. I spoke of community, of the camaraderie that should bind us together, rather than split us into factions. I painted pictures with my words, images of neighborhood barbecues and children's laughter of a place where a dog's bark was a melody rather than a nuisance. And then the moment of irony. The proposal to name my dog the official HOA Mascot, a suggestion made in jest but adopted with enthusiasm. It was more than a symbolic gesture. It was a declaration of change, a reclaiming of the neighborhood spirit from the clutches of one woman's obsession with silence. My dog, now the focal point of attention, seemed to understand the gravity of his new role. He wagged his tail with an exuberance that spoke volumes, embodying the joy and freedom that had been stifled. Karen's facade cracked her grip on control. Slipping like sand through fingers, she tried to interject her voice, rising above the clamor. But the community had found its voice. A collective murmur of agreement drowned her out, leaving her stranded on an island of her own making. I watched as she retreated. Her authority diminished, her influence a shadow of what it once was. She wasn't defeated by anger or vengeance, but by the quiet strength of a community that had rediscovered its roots. As the meeting came to a close, the sun dipped lower, painting the sky in hues of gold and amber. I felt a sense of peace knowing that the neighborhood had been restored not just in structure, but in spirit. Karen lingered at the edge of the gathering, an outsider in the place she once ruled. In the quiet moments that followed, I felt a gentle nudge at my side. I looked down at my dog, his eyes a mirror of the contentment. I felt he had always been more than just a pet. He was a symbol of resilience, a reminder that even the smallest voices can inspire change. And so the neighborhood moved forward, united, resilient, and forever changed by the unlikely mascot whose bark had sparked a revolution.